Professional athletes are often judged, rightly or wrongly, by their postseason accomplishments. And in baseball, no position carries more pressure to deliver championships than first base, the heart of a lineup's run production. A first baseman can even be considered among the greatest of all time without the rings to back it up. And yet, so many all-time great sluggers have never lifted a World Series trophy, which leads to a different GOAT conversation. Who's the greatest player to never have won a World Series championship? The answer to that? It's easy. It's the man many consider the most complete first baseman of his generation, the 1985 American League MVP, the 9-time Gold Glover, the captain of the most storied franchise in baseball history. It's Don Mattingly. But before Mattingly became a Yankees legend, he was a skinny kid from Evansville, Indiana, playing for Wrights Memorial High School. Unlike most future superstars, Mattingly wasn't heavily recruited. In fact, he was so overlooked that he wasn't even drafted until the 19th round of the 1979 draft, the 493rd overall pick. The Yankee scout who recommended him, Jack Gillis, had to fight just to get the organization to spend a few $1,000s on the lanky teenager. Now, most 19th round picks never make it past rookie ball, but Mattingly had something special, an innate ability to hit for both average and power that coaches just couldn't teach. He methodically worked his way through the Yankees minor league system, hitting .349 in AA in 1981 and .315 while at AAA in 1982. But even then, few expected him to become anything more than a solid role player. So Mattingly had learned what it felt like to be underestimated long before he ever made it to the Bronx. But that chip on his shoulder would fuel everything that came next. Mattingly made his debut in September 1982, getting just 4 at-bats. In 1983, he split time between the majors and minors, showing flashes, but nothing that screamed future superstar. The Yankees weren't sure what they had. Was he a first baseman? An outfielder? A bench player? But in 1984, everything changed. Manager Yogi Berra finally gave Mattingly consistent playing time at first base, and the results were immediate and spectacular. What followed was one of the most intense batting title races in Yankee history, Mattingly versus his own teammate Dave Winfield. All season long, the two Yankees traded the league lead back and forth. New York newspapers tracked every at-bat like a heavyweight. By September, Mattingly's average was edging just ahead of Winfield's. The drama reached its peak on the final day of the season. Mattingly went 4 for 5 to finish at .343, while Winfield had a horrible day, going just 1 for 4, giving Mattingly the American League batting crown by a narrow margin, .343 to .340. But that was just the beginning. The batting title was Mattingly's announcement to the baseball world. The kid from Evansville had arrived, and in 1985, he was ready to go absolutely nuclear on the rest of the American League. With the batting title fueling him, Mattingly and the Yankees were ready to dominate, and dominate they did. From the very beginning of 1985, Mattingly was simply untouchable at the plate. He was hitting rockets all over Yankee Stadium and every ballpark the Yankees visited. In just his second full big league season, Mattingly led the American League at age 24 with 48 doubles and 145 RBIs. He tied for third in extra base hits with 86, and his 370 total bases was second only to Rickey Henderson. He also added 35 homers and posted a slash line of .324, .371, and .567. Those numbers were video game-like for the mid-1980s. The MVP race wasn't even close. Mattingly received 23 of 28 first-place votes, demolishing the competition. He had become the first Yankees player to win MVP since Thurman Munson in 1976, and at just 24 years old. It seemed like he was destined for multiple championships and a plaque in Cooperstown. But despite Mattingly's individual brilliance, the Yankees finished 97 and 64. Good enough for second place in the AL East, but not good enough for the playoffs. The Toronto Blue Jays won the division with 99 wins, just 2 games ahead of New York, and Mattingly's MVP season ended without a single postseason at-bat. It was a preview of the frustration that would define his entire career. If anyone thought 1985 was a fluke, Mattingly proved them wrong in 1986. He led the league with 238 hits, 53 doubles, 388 total bases, and a .573 slugging percentage. He also batted .352, hit 31 home runs, and drove in 113 runs. For the second straight year, he was the most complete offensive player in baseball. But once again, individual excellence didn't translate to team success. The Yankees finished 90 and 72, 5.5 games behind the Boston Red Sox. Another MVP caliber season, another missed playoff opportunity. Then came 1987, and with it, both Mattingly's greatest individual achievement and the beginning of his career's most tragic chapter. Early in the season, he was on an absolute tear, hitting grand slams at a pace never seen before or since. By the end of the year, he had hit 6 grand slams, still tied for the MLB's single-season record. But in June 1987, everything changed. Mattingly reportedly injured his back during some clubhouse horseplay with pitcher Bob Shirley, though Mattingly would later say that he was born with a congenital defect and had managed back issues his entire life. But the back issues worsened. He spent 5 days in traction at a hospital and missed all the games from June 5th to June 23rd. When he returned, he was never quite the same player. The injury had robbed him of the effortless power that made him special. The chronic back injury sapped much of his power at just age 29. Between 1985 and 1987, Mattingly hit 96 home runs with just 114 strikeouts, an incredible power-to-contact ratio. But after the back injury, the power numbers plummeted. His home run totals dropped from the 30s to the teens. And while he remained an excellent contact hitter and Gold Glove defender, he was no longer the MVP caliber 4 seed been. Meanwhile, the Yankees entered their darkest period since the early 1960s. From 1988 to 1992, they had just one winning season. While Mattingly battled his back problems, the organization around him crumbled. George Steinbrenner's constant meddling, poor draft picks, and bad trades had turned the once mighty Yankees into a laughingstock. But Mattingly remained the one constant bright spot. Even diminished, he was still one of the best first basemen in baseball. He won Gold Gloves year after year, maintained a 300-plus batting average, and provided veteran leadership to a young, struggling team. The cruel irony was becoming clear. Mattingly's prime years were being wasted on terrible Yankees teams, while his physical decline was beginning just as the organization started to rebuild. Father Time and franchise mismanagement were conspiring against one of the most complete players of his generation. As the 1990s progressed, something interesting started to happen in the Bronx. Young talents like Bernie Williams, Jorge Posada, and Derek Jeter were coming up through the system. Veterans like Paul O'Neill and Tino Martinez were acquired via trade. Slowly but surely, the Yankees were building something special. But for Mattingly, time was running out. By 1994, he was 33 years old and had never played a single postseason game. The back problems limited him to 97 games that season, though he still hit .304. Then came the players' strike, which wiped out the World Series and crushed any hopes of a playoff run. As he entered the 1995 season, Mattingly knew it might be his last chance. The Yankees had quietly assembled a talented roster, and for the first time in years, expectations were rising in the Bronx. Manager Buck Showalter had brought stability and competence to the organization. 1995 would have been Mattingly's last season, still having not made it to the playoffs, but that would change when the Yankees made it to the AL wildcard. After 13 seasons and over 1,700 games, Don Mattingly was finally going to play October baseball. The moment was so powerful that Mattingly, the stoic captain, broke down in tears. 13 years of individual excellence, of carrying mediocre teams, of battling through injuries and disappointment, it all led to this moment. The Yankees' first-round opponent was the Seattle Mariners, led by Ken Griffey Jr., Edgar Martinez, and Randy Johnson. It was a heavyweight matchup between two hungry franchises desperate to break through. In Game 1 at Yankee Stadium, Mattingly delivered one of his most clutch performances ever. In the bottom of the 6th inning, with the Yankees trailing 4-3, he laced a double off Chris Bosio that drove in a run, tying the game and sending Yankee Stadium into a frenzy. The crowd erupted, chanting, "Donnie Baseball," as Mattingly stood on second, pumping his fist. After all those years of waiting, Mattingly was finally seizing his playoff moment. The Yankees surged to a 9-6 victory, and for a brief moment it felt like destiny. Maybe this was finally Mattingly's year. Maybe all the heartbreak and frustration had been building to this championship run. But baseball has a cruel way of crushing dreams. The Mariners stormed back to win Game 2, then took both games in Seattle to push the series to a decisive Game 5 back in New York. In that final game, with everything on the line, the Yankees jumped out to an early lead, but Seattle answered back, and the game remained tight throughout. In the bottom of the 11th inning, with the season hanging in the balance, the Mariners' Edgar Martinez lined a 2-run double down the left field line. Ken Griffey Jr. rounded third and slid home with the series-winning run. The Yankees' season was over. Mattingly's playoff dream had lasted exactly 5 games. 2 months after that crushing playoff loss, Don Mattingly announced his retirement. At 34, his back couldn't handle another season, and he refused to become a shadow of his former self. Don Mattingly has never won a World Series. Don Mattingly last played in 1995. The timing was absolutely cruel. The very next season, 1996, the Yankees won their first World Series since 1978. They would go on to win 4 championships in 5 years, establishing a new dynasty. All those young players Mattingly had mentored, Jeter, Posada, Williams, they got their rings. But the captain, who had carried the franchise through its darkest years, missed out on the glory by a single season. It really sucks that the lack of a World Series title overshadows what he accomplished in his career, because damn was he good. He had a .307 batting average, 2,153 hits, 222 homers, 1,099 RBIs, and 1,007 runs scored. He won 9 Gold Glove Awards, 1 MVP award, and 3 Silver Slugger Awards. But perhaps most importantly, he redefined what it meant to be a complete first baseman. His defensive excellence set a new standard for the position, and his ability to hit for both average and power in clutch situations made him the prototype for modern first baseman. Despite his excellence, Mattingly fell short in the Writers' Hall of Fame voting. His career counting stats, 2,153 hits, 222 homers, and 1,099 RBI, were not enough. The voters looked at his relatively short peak and the lack of postseason success and decided it wasn't quite enough for Cooperstown. But that decision says more about the limitations of traditional baseball metrics than it does about Mattingly's greatness. In his prime from 1984 to 1987, he was arguably the best player not named Wade Boggs or Rickey Henderson. His combination of hitting ability, defensive excellence, and leadership made him the complete package. More than the statistics though, Mattingly represented something special about baseball. He was the small-town kid who made it through hard work and determination. He was the professional who carried himself with dignity, even when his teams were terrible. He was the captain who never complained, never made excuses, and always put the team first. One of the most popular players in franchise history, and quite possibly the greatest Yankee never to have appeared in a World Series, Mattingly proved that you don't need a ring to have your career validated. He was the best first baseman of his generation, and his influence on the position can still be seen today. The Yankees retired his number 23 in 1997, and rightfully so. In Monument Park, his plaque simply reads, "A humble man of grace and dignity, a captain who led by example." No mention of World Series titles or Hall of Fame plaques, just recognition of the man and player he was. So he really doesn't need a ring to have his career validated. Mattingly was the most complete first baseman the Yankees had ever seen, and he paved the way for the dynasty that followed. His legacy isn't defined by what he didn't win, it's defined how he played the game, and how he showed that excellence doesn't always come with championships attached. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of baseball's greatest what-if stories, stick with Dugout Diamonds, subscribe, and check out some of our other content exploring the legends who made baseball the game we love.